Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julianne Grant. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at Razorleaf. Today, we welcome you to our Aras Tech Tuesday webinar. We are going to be providing an update on Release 18 and also giving you a demonstration of our Essig CAD Connector Release 10.0. It's just a couple housekeeping notes for everyone. We are recording this webinar. We will be sharing the recording shortly after the broadcast. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to enter them in the questions panel. We'll be watching for those, and we will have a questions and Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rodney Coffey, our host for today.
Hey, good afternoon. It's good to have everybody back. I'll kind of tee up our agenda here for today, and then we'll pass it off to the technical folks for presentations. Today, we're going to, of course, look at the major updates that have been released in Aras Innovator 18, as well as we have we've been talking about how each release has released a few more things, and we wanted to start filling some of our Tech Tuesday time with information that surrounded those releases or new releases. So in that vein, we invited Aaron Kelly and Hunter Erfman along from our partner Essig to talk about the new release of the Essig CAD Connector as well. We know we have a number of customers using that connector for SolidWorks and some other CAD tools as well. With that, something we did last time that we thought would be worthwhile doing again is the notable release notes. So as we talked about, there's some things that we think are happening on the platform that maybe folks are missing just because they're buried in the release notes. So Milan will talk about those types of things, and then we will wrap with Q&A today. So we'll keep it concise and hopefully share a lot of good information for everyone. So with that, I will pass it off to Milan.
All right, Ronnie, everyone hear me all right?
Yeah, you're good.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so today we're going to kick it off with some of Innovator 18's most significant enhancements. So let's get straight to it. So we've been talking a lot about TechDocs framework for the last couple of releases, and there's some more pretty simple stuff that they've been adding, especially for this release. So in this case, they're adding the ability to modify the size of image elements just by selecting and dragging the image corners, essentially making the TechDocs framework a little more text editor-like, more like a Microsoft Word, and making it more easy to use. And we can expect more of these ease of use updates as we go down the line with these releases. Alongside this is some back-end updates to how the in-basket is built, mainly just providing more efficiency while the in-basket is being loaded, cutting down on wait times, cutting down on wait times for users trying to access their tasks, especially for workflows and project tasks. But this increase in efficiency will also carry over to, say, non-standard tasks, things that were created making use of the configurable in-basket. And then along with this, some more updates to federation within Aras, just another property being added within this release. So the federated attribute can now be used on Boolean properties as well. There's not too many more of these simple federation updates on the roadmap. We can look forward to more exciting things from federation coming pretty soon. And then finally is introducing the process engine to Innovator 14 Plus, and especially with this release, enhancements to the execution templates framework. So within the TechDocs framework, just the new updates are really trying to allow for greater ease of use and improving its capabilities as a text editor. We already know that TechDocs is one of its key features is being able to relate your live PLM data to these documents, but the process of creating the documents in the past was not as easy as preferred. So Aras is really trying to make the TechDocs framework a legitimate text editor, make things simpler to use, and get more people to make use of the functionality, because being able to relate that live data to documents and being able to actively update it as your files go through change or your items go through change is extremely important. Alongside this, Aras has provided some updated documentation on the framework within the CD image. So it's going to highlight some of these new features that we've been touching on since Innovator 14. And like I said, there's going to be more of this to come in the future, especially for next release. Tech docs and MPP are going to begin to start merging back together. They've kind of sprouted off of the same tree and branched apart. And now with these upcoming releases, Aras is going to begin to start interweaving them back together. And since they have so much similar functionality, might as well allow both to make use of each other. And moving on, we'll get to the process engine and the execution templates framework. So for those of you that don't know, the Aras process engine will allow users to create process and task automation definitions, process instances and related definitions as well, and also access active and historical instances. But the key thing here is also it'll allow for the generic execution of DOS batch scripts via the conversion server, allowing you to automate simple tasks within your Aras Innovator database. There are also, within the process engine, there are 3 main item types that are configured here. The first being the execution type. That'll define your basic execution logic. And that is done just by making use of standard methods that'll contain all of the logic that is necessary to perform whichever task you're trying to define. Alongside this will be our task definitions. And so these will essentially define the business logic that comes on top of that execution logic from the execution type. And multiple execution types are able to be assigned to the same task definition. And then finally, it comes down to our tasks, which are created from these task definitions and will represent the instantiation of the task definition. So when the process engine is called as a service, the task will provide the info to instantiate the task from that task definition. So key additions coming up with the process engine is the ability to have some asynchronous processing of these task services methods. So being able to run them, say, in off hours, not all at the same time, to preserve, say, server resources, make things run a lot smoother for you. And as well, a simpler UI to input values and fields, just making use of the more familiar UI that item types and item forms all have within the Aras Innovator environment. Moving on to the next. Once again, checking up on federation. So within the Aras roadmap, there are about 2 data types remaining to be federated within the roadmap. So upcoming next will be decimal properties. As I mentioned already, Boolean properties were touched on within release 18. And then finally, unsigned big integer properties are going to be on the backlog. So I would anticipate those anywhere from release 21 to 22. And then there's still these future enhancements that are in the analyzing phase of their roadmap that I wouldn't expect anytime, say, Q2, Q3. I would be on the lookout for the Federation Services engine to get off the ground sometime early next year, Q1, Q2. That's where all of this kind of pre-work that might seem not as significant, we're just allowing specific data types to be federated. That's where all of that will kind of come all together and really push to really allow Aras to make this push towards federation that they've been trying to do since the start of this new release model, Innovator 14 Plus. All right, so on to the next, just going through some quick notable release notes here. So continue enhancements to the talk editor. There's just some certain bugs where if you say were to delete a item type, create a new item type with the same name, you weren't able to add it to the table of contents. Also allowing adding some server-side converters for use in grids, item views, and tree grid views as well. Also touching on some authentication, making sure external everything that. So essentially, sorry for a second, got lost. So client certificate authentication allowing inter-server communication, but only for subscribers. For non-subscribers, that will all have to be on the host server. Yeah, and then some other small things such as updating some messaging that pops up for errors. Also some issues with the find function in a side-by-side viewing. But with that pretty much covers the release. Like I said, in the future, a lot of these things that may seem trivial at the moment are really building towards something bigger. I'm anticipating release 19 to finalize or begin that process of the mending of the tech docs framework and MPP kind of schism that happened when they were first introduced. Will now be moving together and merging some of that functionality. So yeah, with that, let's we can hand it over to the folks from Essig, and they can start giving us a run through what's new with their connectors. So Aaron, I guess I'll hand it off to you.
Great, thank you, Milan. Hello, everyone. I'm Erin Kelly. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at Essig PLM. I'll be stepping you through a brief presentation covering our connector support for Aras Innovator, and then that will be followed by a brief demonstration of the connector. Next slide. So Essig PLM provides connectors for the leading mechanical CAD design tools such as SolidWorks, Autodesk AutoCAD, Autodesk Inventor, Siemens NX, and PTC's Creo. Next slide. So today we'll focus on our most recent release, our Connector 10, which has been developed against the latest Aras Innovator platform, DLL. Our connector release schedule is typically one major release per year to the Aras platform, with dot releases to address additional enhancements, fixes, customer requests, CAD service packs, etc. The CAD support is typically the latest release and two prior. So for example, SolidWorks 2022, 2021, and 2020. With the release introduction of 2023, for example, we would then drop support of 2020. So with the Connector 10, we are supporting Aras Innovator 14, 15, and 16. We've already identified a dot release. So the Connector 10.0.1 will support Aras 17 as it's released. And we're also incorporating support for the newly introduced Aras Innovator SaaS solution. So different containerization, some additional .NET updates that will all get bundled into our Connector 10 release. And again, as I mentioned, the CAD support, so SolidWorks 2022, 2021, and 2020, Inventor and AutoCAD 2022, 2021, and 2020, Creo 8, 7, and 6, and then NX 1926, 1899, and 12 are all supported on the Connector 10 release. Next slide. So for each release, it is typically comprised of 4 components for Essig PLM. One is a framework. So for all of our connectors, we have developed a framework. This helps with development. It helps with continuity across all of the different user interfaces, as well as our interface to Aras Innovator. So for Connector 10, some of the framework updates, this requires some work with the CAD and Aras API, in this case for multi-root items. Additional framework enhancements were around performance, around operations such as our Workspace Explorer or our register hierarchy functions. Again, as I mentioned, the support matrix is a component of the connector, and that is always, that support matrix of what version of Aras and what version of the CAD. So in this case, it is supporting 14, 15, and 16. And then the customer-driven enhancements, that's another core component of every connector release. So in this case, Connector 10 was supporting such items as the store BOM of assemblies with multiple root items, as well as checking status tracking of generations. The last element of enhancements is, just what is, what's on our roadmap? What is the Essig PLM roadmap? And that was support of multiple viewable items. So in previous connector releases, so for example, our Connector 9, we typically focused on supporting one singular type of viewable. So if you're familiar with our connectors, you can generate a viewable. So you could either select a PDF, a STEP, or an 𝘎𝑽𝑔𝑠, but it was one and not multiple. In this case, for connector 10, we introduced a primary and a secondary viewable. And then one PDF for multiple sheets of AutoCAD drawings, and then the backward attribute mapping to multiple sheets of AutoCAD drawings. So we've always supported attribute mapping, both bidirectional, so from the CAD to from CAD through the connector up to Aras, and then also Aras Innovator property mapping back down through the connector into CAD. However, there was a special nuance around multiple sheets of AutoCAD, and we are now supporting that. So next slide. So what's coming next? So that is our connector 10 that's out now and available for any upgraded Aras Innovator subscriber. And then we'll be looking at our 10.1 release, which will be coming in June, and that will be additional framework enhancements around always performance improvements anywhere we can make them. Additional changes that were introduced on our connector 9 platform. So we'll continue to support our connector 9 customers and provide enhancements. We'll roll those up into our connector 10 and then add support for any additional Aras iterative releases. For example, 18, 19, 20, whatever is being released between now and June, we'll roll up and support in our connector 10 platform. Additional, we'll add support for Autodesk 2023 as that's due to be released within that time frame. So that will be across the board, including Inventor, AutoCAD, AutoCAD Mechanical. Creo 9 is due to be released in early May, so we'll incorporate support for that, as well as NX 1980 in 2007. Additional enhancements, multi-store BOM intelligence, CAD branching has been of interest for quite some time for us, and then additional user interface improvements, auto filtering, dialog boxes, etc. So we're always looking to enhance our connectors and get feedback from our user community. So next slide. And so that summarizes what is available in the connector 10 release. And now we're going to segue over to Hunter for a demonstration.
Okay. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. So this is just a slide to go over what I'm going to be presenting with the connector. So I'm going to be utilizing SolidWorks 2021, and I'll go over some of the user interface when I bring that up. But I have an assembly that I'm going to use during this that I'm going to register. I'm going to create my items, my part item, my CAD document item, and I'm going to store my physical CAD files and then zip up my part items and store a bill of material. So with those operations, we'll see some of the property mappings take place, the resource settings that are defined in my project, and the enhancement made for the multi-root items when dealing with assembly configurations. And I'll go over some of the related items that are shown. And then after those are completed, I'll do a retrieve, a modify, and I'll store the assembly back into Aras, and I'll go over the check status feature and go back into the bill of material within Aras. So I'll go ahead and pull my screen up. Let's see which screen is up now. Do you see SolidWorks?
Yep, you're good, Hunter.
Okay, perfect. So I have this assembly, and so what I'm going to do first is just show this PLM tab. So this is integrated into my SolidWorks session to where I have my connector features at the top here. So the first thing I'm going to do is select settings, and I'm already logged in. So basically within here, I have my session information, who I'm logged in as, the database I'm connected to, and the project I'm in. But what I want to focus on is some of the resource settings and property mappings. So within the resource settings, this is sort of the behavior that's defined for my project. So how the CAD tool is going to interact with the connector and Aras. So some of the things you see here in black, these are resource settings that are controlled at an admin level within Aras. In the items you see in blue, these are usually kept as at a user level that can be changed within this dialog window. So we'll see some of these resource settings take place, like auto erase. After I'm done storing my items, we'll see my session clear and my work folder clear, so I can work on a next part or next assembly with a clean work folder. One of the things that I'll highlight is at the very bottom here, the store viewables. So for my drawings, I have a PDF that's going to be stored in a DXF file. For my parts, I could also have a 3D PDF stored, but typically that's kept to the conversion server. So for this demonstration, I'll just be showing the parts created with a step file. And we'll see that within Aras. So going to my property mappings, so for the file properties that are within your files, I'm sure you want those mapped over to Aras Innovator. So if you see here, this is sort of just some of the default property mappings, things like name and description that the connector is looking into the properties of your file to grab and push over. And of course, there's multiple ways to create your part numbers using the connector. For this demonstration, I'm showing the sequence SolidWorks demo that I had created that the connector is looking into Aras, and it's pulling that sequence number. And of course, I could also have this defined to look for a predefined part number within my file property that I can use for my part number as well. But I'll go ahead and close this and get to registering and storing this assembly. So going to register, the connector's prompting me that these files are going to be renamed, and it will load into a register window to where I can see this CAD structure, and I can see each one of the items that I'm going to be generating a part number for. And I'll see 3 windows here. So my hierarchy window, my item information window, and my related items window. So right now, these are blank, so I'll go ahead and select all, generate my part number based on the sequence that I have defined in Aras. And when that is taking place, it's also grabbing the file properties, any custom properties that I may have, and it's mapping that information over as well. So the name property is starting to map over, as you can see to the right. The part number, the type this is, so component. And as I click through these, what I'll see is for this cable here, I have some configurations that I can name. So I'll go ahead and select these configurations here. I could give this the next sequential number, but for this demonstration, I'll just go ahead and assign family part numbers to give it a dash number. And the same for the top level assembly. So I have a configuration for the top level here. I'm going to do the same thing for this one. I'm going to assign a family part number. And so I've assigned family part numbers for my configurations, but I also want to see what I have for drawings on some of these components. So let me look which one I have a drawing for. Should be here. So I have a drawing for this related item. So I'm also going to be generating a DXF file for this. But I also have my viewable file that I can select, and I can just get a quick look at what I'm pushing over to Aras. So I've generated my part number, I have my document number, and I'm just going to go ahead and commit this register. And during this operation, the part items are going to be created, the CAD document items are going to be created, and it's going to start mapping that any property mappings that I have defined. It's going to push that information over to Aras. So I haven't yet stored the CAD file yet, the actual physical CAD file. So that's going to be done in the next operation that I have, which is the store operation. So in the background here, some of those PDF viewables are being generated. and it's processing that and pushing over again those mappings. And I'll let this complete, and then we'll jump to the store. And after that's complete, it'll let me know that the operation was successful, and I'll continue to the store document operation. So right now in Aras, I do have those items created. And again, for this operation, I'm going to be storing the actual physical CAD files. So we'll see some of those property mappings take place for the CAD document. And if I hover over this, I see an icon that's letting me know this is registered but not stored. And it looks like there it is. So I'll go ahead and just commit this store operation and get these CAD files pushed over and linked to my CAD document. It's jumping over back to my PowerPoint back there. Close that out. And so right now, since I've defined in my resource settings some extra files to be generated for my parts, which were the step files. In the background, you'll notice some things going on. So that's what the connector is doing now. It's generating those step files to place those or store them into Aras as well. So that's why it's kind of, you see some things going on in the background there. And so if I wanted, that's when the 3D PDF generation would also be created if I had that defined in a resource setting. And so after this operation, it'll also let me know that that was complete. So now I'm going to go to my store BOM. And if you remember, I had created a configuration for the top level assembly. So for my bill of material, I'll have some options here. So this is an enhancement that was done, so I don't have to go back and open up the second configuration and store the bill of material. I can do that all directly from within here. So I could just select maybe the default and store the selected, but I could also just select all of them and do store selected, or just select store all. So I want to store both configurations bill of materials. I'll go ahead and select store all here. And so now that operation is going to take place, and I'll be prompted with a store BOM window that'll show those two bills of material. So here's the default, and if I scroll down here, we'll see the other configurations bill of material. So I can manage both configurations BOMs within the connector. And I'll go ahead and just commit this store. And then after this operation, we'll see one of the resource settings take place to erase my session and clear my work folder. So I have everything stored in Aras. So if I hit OK here, it'll clear my session. I have a clean work folder. I can retrieve a part or the next assembly that I want to work on, and just sort of keep a clean workspace. So I'm going to jump over to Aras where I've stored these items, and I'll do a search on the top level assembly. So search here. I'll go ahead and go to the top level. I'll see the bill of material for this configuration. If I go over to the CAD documents, I'll see the CAD document here. So I'll select that. And so I don't have a step file for the top level assembly because I didn't define it in my resource setting. But if I go to one of these parts here, like this case, I will see the step file. And the reason it's placed in the viewable file is because I didn't define a 3D PDF. So if I had defined that, or if that is being controlled by the conversion server, this step file would be placed in the Files tab. So I have the step file for, if I go back over to my structure, I have a step file for each of these, and for the drawing, if I go back, I believe it was this case here. I have my drawing viewable that I can select and open up and take a look at in the other configuration. Next page here. So now I can manage this bill of materials separately. And so that was the connector 10.0 with a few of the enhancements made for the bill of material. And so now that I have that information stored into Aras, I'm going to go ahead and retrieve what I've done, make a change, and check that back in. So doing retrieve, I can search on that file. I'll just search by the prefix. And I will load up the top level assembly. And what you'll notice is since I had cleared my work folder, the operation is copy. So I'm getting a copy from the vault. And I'll go ahead and retrieve. So now the connector had pulled these back into my work folder so that I can make some changes. Let's say I'm pulling in this top level assembly maybe to make a property change or possibly a constraint change. So I could also mark this for lock during this retrieve operation if I wanted to. If you notice, it's a little grayed out at the top left here, but I could mark this for checkout, which would lock this item when it's placing it into my work folder. It looks like connector may be stuck on one of these items here. And on my other screen, I'll try to pull over my work folder so you can see what is being placed into here. So here's my work folder. So like I said before, I cleared my work folder. So now it's placing all of these files into this location. This is what I have defined for the connector for this particular project as the work folder. And for some reason, it looks like I am stuck on one of these items. Pull this over. Thinking I got stuck on one of these CAD files here. Let me try to clear something. Give me 1 second here.
This is when you can tell it's a live demonstration.
Yep. All right, so it looks like I got stuck on something. So what I'm going to do real quick is just kill this window here and reopen this. Sorry about that. Okay. So I'm going to log back in. And I'm going to just retrieve a subassembly. So So let's see, so I have my settings, retrieve. And I had cleared my work folder on the other screen, so retrieve one of these assemblies here. And so again, the copy operation, since I had just cleared my work folder again, it's gonna get a copy from the vault and place it into my work folder. So I'm not too sure what may have a corrupt file that I got caught on, but for this subassembly here, let's say I want to make a change, maybe to a property. So I'm gonna go ahead and lock this, go into my properties. Let's see, we'll do summary, we'll change the title. So let's say there was a custom property or something that I had needed to change. Another cool feature with the connector is some enhancements made to the check status. So let's say that another employee was working on this CAD document part here. They had modified and checked it in, but I still had this current version of my work folder. The connector would prompt me with an icon. If you look at the check status up at the top with this red asterisk, letting me know that this is a non-latest generation. So one of the things I can do is select this check status, and it'll run a check on each of the items in my session. And right now, since I had just modified the top level, the connector is letting me know I have a file modified in session. So I can run a check status on the entire hierarchy that I have loaded in my session. So if there was a non-latest version, I could just select that, and then if I were to hit OK, which I won't do for this particular item, but I would select the checkbox, hit OK, and the connector would grab a copy of the latest and update my CAD structure. So I've made a change to this. I just changed the name, so I won't register again since these are already registered. I'll just go ahead and store. And again, my store window. So I'm checking in this top level item that I had changed, and I'm not going to check these in since I didn't make a change to them. And I will just store this. And so since this is an assembly, I'll go to the store BOM and store my bill of material. And again, my session will be cleared so that I can continue to retrieve a subcomponent and make some changes. So I believe that's all that I had to present for the CAD connector. So who should I pass the screen on to now?
Yeah, you can pass it right back to me, Hunter.
Okay. Change presenter. Is that good?
Yeah, and you guys should be seeing the question slide again.
Perfect.
All right, so perfect. This is so thank you, Hunter and Aaron, for your presentation on the CAD connector. I guess now is time to open up the floor for some questions.
Great, thanks, Milan. We do have a couple of questions in, and if anyone does have a question, please put them in the questions panel. First question is, what's the difference between the process engine and the regular innovator service? I think this has to do with the beginning of the first part of the presentation.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you can join.
Yeah, we can.
So the question is, what is the difference between the process engine and the regular innovator service?
Well, the one thing I've noticed so far from my research on the process engine is the main purpose I've drawn from it is firing off these batch processes. So the main focus of the process engine so far is executing these DOS batch scripts, making use of the conversion server as well. Innovator service
Okay.
Yeah.
Second question I have is regarding the process engine. Can it also fire client events? This would be a big difference to the customer innovator service, to the current innovator service. I'm thinking about push notifications or similar.
I think the intention is that it does. I think that is the difference. So to kind of piggyback on what Milan was saying, I think that is one of the differences. So if you think of this more as a, like, I think this is still early on too. There was some things in the release note about this, but I think if you search abroad, you won't find too much on this from Aras at this point. So we are further investigation. And I think the intention is that this is built to be a processing, like a batch processing engine, rather than just the type of things that you do with the innovator service today.
Okay, great. Okay. We do have a question in for Essig. Can the Essig connector create additional deliverables like STP on the conversion server?
Yes, so when the connector registers and stores an item, that can fire off an event to the conversion server to create other viewable types. So as Hunter mentioned, like say 3D PDFs, but I'm sorry, I missed the file type that you mentioned.
Step was the one he asked.
Oh, step, yes. Yep. So that step could be created either through the connector or leveraging the conversion server.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question for Essig. How quickly do you introduce support of a new CAD releases?
Sure. So typically it's within 45 days. We do get a pre-release of the CAD package, and then we do our development and testing in QA, and then we target that for an established connector release schedule. We may hold off beyond the 45 days depending upon stability. So we have seen some, needing to wait for SP1, for example. But we do typically try to support within 45 days.
Great. Another question for Essig. Do the connectors all have the same level of functionality?
Great question. So we do try to keep the features and capabilities consistent across all of our connectors through that framework that I mentioned. That framework gives us the capability of providing all the same look and feel function. We do try to make them function within the Aras Innovator environment consistent. I'm sorry, there's an echo. And then we do, each CAD package has its own nuances. So you might start to see some differentiation. For example, SolidWorks has configurations and design library and toolbox support, whereas Inventor might have iParts and iProjects or Content Center support. And then you've got NX that may need supportive wave geometry. So each CAD tool has its own nuances, but we do try to keep the functionality and the interface to Aras Innovator very consistent.
Great, thanks. One last question here for Essig. What if we're using an older version of CAD that isn't shown on your slides?
Okay, so certainly we would work with yourself or Razorleaf to look at that support matrix, right? You've got to look at what version of Aras Innovator, what version of CAD, and what version of the connector would be needed to support that. The good news is that we can move you forward. We have utilities such as version migrate that could take all of your, say, SolidWorks 2017 data up to SolidWorks 2021 or 2022.
Okay, great. And one last question we have for Razorleaf. We've seen a lot of uses for Razorleaf Clover. What is the difference between the Aras process engine and Clover?
I can take that one, Milan. Yeah, so I think the introduction of the process engine is going to be really interesting, right? We had a lot of good questions about that today. I think we're going to as Aras gives us more information on that, we'll dive into that further and give you some demonstrations. But the key here is I think you're going to kind of have if you think about process engines, maybe the gold, silver, bronze, let's use that approach. So while the innovator service gives you a way to maybe lightly do things in the back end, the process engine is going to give you more of a batch method to do so, but that's still within the Aras world. So think of things, triggers off a workflow, maybe something like going to create another item type or going to do some type of event on a certain field population or form population. Those types of things are still kind of native to the Aras application. So Clover is maybe the gold when it comes to this fast processing type items. Let's think, at the lower level, think of things like PDF creation or going through and sending a spreadsheet or a database information to another place. And then at the highest level, what we're really using Clover for, and the majority of our customers, is business system integration. So the other thing to note is Clover is, while the processing engine is being built purely around Aras, even though we talk about Clover in the confines of Aras within these calls, you have to remember that Razorleaf is much broader than just Aras. So Clover is being developed across Aras, 𝙀𝙀𝙍𝙬, PTC, Autodesk, as well as other business systems, SAP, Oracle, everything under Oracle, JDE, Business Suite, Salesforce, all of the above, right? So there's much bigger integration goals for the Clover platform product and what we're doing with our clients than say what we're going to be able to do with the processing engine. So I think it is one of these areas where something new kind of pops up and it muddies the water a little bit. So I think in future Tech Tuesdays we will continue to do a good job of separating how our customers are taking advantage of each one of these items.
Great, thanks, Rodney. Any last questions? Please enter them in the questions panel. Let's give it another second. I think we're set, Rodney.
Very good. So we can go to the next slide there. Yep. So we are going to do something a little bit different with our next Tech Tuesday. Each release has been fairly light as far as Aras is doing a good job of releasing new things in smaller bits and packages. To fill this time, we thought what we would do is maybe spread the sessions out a little bit. So our next Tech Tuesday will be on July 12th, and we expect to be able to talk about some pretty good things in that call. 3D visualization, there's some MPP enhancements we know that are on the way, and some new functionality around the Office connector. So we're going to kind of stockpile some new feature sets, that way we can fill the time and make it more valuable. And then also, we do have our Clover Collected webinar coming up on May 10th. So that'll be I believe the first time we have publicly shown the Collected product abroad. We've done that webinar a number of times with clients, and just kind of privately, but that'll be our first time we release that to the broad public. So we're pretty excited about that. That's a fantastic product, and we've got some customers that are really doing some great things with that today. And then here in the quarter, we have our Aras subscriber user group on June 9th. So if I know we have a few subscribers on the call. If you have topics for that, we're still sorting out exactly who our guest speakers are going to be and what topics we're going to cover for that day. So that last event went really well. We're super excited about doing that on June 9th. So I haven't seen anything else pop up in the question queue, so I just want to thank Aaron and Hunter for coming along today to share the new things about the connector. We're always glad to have them along. They're a fantastic partner of ours, and obviously thanks to Julianne and Milan for helping us keep Tech Tuesday alive. So we will see everyone on July 12th. Thank you.
Great, thanks everybody. Have a good day.